Pirates have threatened the waters of oceans all over the globe since ancient times, almost as long as maritime travel and commerce have been widespread. However, there are particular periods throughout history where piracy became a constant and almost unavoidable threat to those that traveled across seas. One of these periods where pirates were at their most overwhelming and influential in history is the 1650s to the late 1720s, a period commonly referred to as the Golden Age of piracy. During this time, almost all important sea trade routes were constantly bombarded by the notorious sea robbers. The first is the buccaneering period, from approximately 1650 to 1680. During this time period, piracy and privateering, a form of piracy that was legally allowed so long as a portion of the captured cargo was sent back to the crown, were at an all-time high in the Caribbean. Spain had claimed Christopher Columbus's discovery of the New World as one massive colony, which quickly proved to be unsustainable due to its massive size and the fact that every other empire raced to claim their piece of the New World. Piracy actually became a valuable force in the bloody and ruthless battles fought over territory disputes. The Spanish Empire began to move massive wealths of riches out of their colonies in the Spanish Main and West Indies, which became a prime target for pirates. French, British, and Dutch privateers and pirates, or buccaneers, mainly operated out of pirate havens such as Tortuga and Port Royal. However, as the 17th century drew to a close and the Treaty of Ryswick ended territory disputes in the Caribbean, many buccaneers settled down and turned to an honest way of earning a living, such as farming or log cutting. The second period of the Golden Age of piracy is the Pirate Round, in the 1690s. In 1693, an English pirate named Thomas Tew innovated the concept of sailing around the Cape of Good Hope of Africa to reach the Indian Ocean and raid ships there. Pirates followed him in flocking to the Indian Ocean to capture fortunes. One outrageous heist of the Pirate Round was pulled off by Thomas Tew and a pirate named Henry Every. Tew was killed, but Every managed to capture a ship personally owned by Emperor Aurangzeb of the Mughal Empire in India. The emperor was so outraged by this that the British East India Company nominated a man named William Kidd to hunt down pirates in the Indian Ocean, but Kidd only became a pirate himself. Nonetheless, with the rise of privateering again in the 18th century, activity along the Pirate Round declined. The third and final period of the Golden Age of piracy is referred to as the post-Spanish Succession period and extends from 1716 to 1726. This is the major period of the Golden Age, and the modern conception of pirates as depicted in pop culture comes largely from this period. The War of the Spanish Succession began in 1700 when Charles II of Spain died with no male heirs, creating a succession crisis for the Habsburg dynasty as the other colonial powers began planning to carve up the massive Spanish Empire. France's King Louis XIV's grandson, Duke Philip of Anjou, was made the King of Spain, making the other nations wary of the threat of a Spanish-French alliance. England, the Dutch Republic, Austria, and their allies in the Holy Roman Empire supported Emperor Leopold I's claim to the throne through his son Archduke Charles, and war was declared in May of 1702. Conflicts were fought in both Europe and the West Indies between 1701 and 1714 over the control of the Spanish Empire's territories. The war ended with the Treaty of Utrecht in 1713 and the Treaty of Rastatt in 1714, which gave the Austrians most of the former European holdings in Spain and allowed Duke Philip of Anjou to maintain Spain and Spanish-American territories as long as he renounced his claim to the French crown. The end of this war brought a massive rise to piracy in the Caribbean, the North American seaboard, the West African coast, and the Indian Ocean. Many sailors served in the Royal Navy, but when the war ended, they were relieved of duty and left, unemployed, at a time when cross-Atlantic colonial shipping trade was booming, providing a rich pool for pirate recruits. The transatlantic slave trade gained popularity in the 18th century and became a prime target for piracy. Even the conditions on board merchant ships were so poor that many sailors mutinied and became pirates. The pirate life was certainly not easy, but unlike what people may think, captains did not have a complete dictatorship over their ship. They were voted in and expected to follow a strict set of rules. Since many pirates had once served on merchant or navy ships where they were treated horribly, they wanted to make sure crews were not being unfairly taken advantage of by their captains. In contrast to the earlier periods during the Golden Age of piracy, the post-Spanish Succession period occurred during a time of relative peace and stability. Gone was the need of legal or semi-legal piracy that aided in the many European wars and the colonization of the New World. Pirates were now outlaws, but this would only make them more famous. A book entitled A General History of Robberies and Murders of the Most Notorious Pirates, or just A General History of Pirates, was published in 1724 and featured the biographies of many pirates from the post-Spanish Succession period. The author of this book is listed as Captain Charles Johnson, but it is believed to be a pen name. There's a lot of speculation as to who authored one of the only primary source works from the 18th century of the Golden Age of piracy, but As is the case for much of this patch of history, we cannot know for sure. However, we do know that by elevating characters such as the English pirates Edward Blackbeard Teach and Calico Jack Rackham to an almost mythical status, Captain Johnson created the modern conception of a pirate. The first edition of this book was a tremendous success, and a second edition was released later that year with considerable additions. These additions came in the form of two particular pirates that stood out from the rest. While most pirates were men, there are some cases of women pirates, the best known being Anne Bonny and Mary Read. The tale of these two women is one of adventure, romance, and tragedy that even 3 centuries later continues to thrill audiences far and wide. Anne Bonny was born in Kinsale, County Cork, Ireland, as the illegitimate daughter of William Cormac, an attorney, and the servant maid of their house, Mary Brennan. The exact date of her birth is unknown, but it is likely around 1700. William's wife at the time had fallen ill and went to spend some time with her mother-in-law in order to get a change of air. During this time, a young man from the town was courting the servant maid looking after the house. While spending time with her, the man slipped 3 silver spoons into his pocket, and when the maid realized they were missing, she accused him of stealing them. However, he denied it and told her to check the house again, proceeding to hide the spoons in the sheets of her bed, assuming she would find them when she went to sleep that night. But the maid did not find them and told the constable to have the man apprehended for it. He did not think much of it at first, but after 4 days passed and he was told the constable was still searching for him, he presumed that the maid had stolen the spoons for himself. William's wife, now recovered from her illness, returned to the house with her mother-in-law and was immediately told of the business of the missing spoons. The young man went to her and told her how he intended it to be a simple joke, but the maid had clearly stolen them and was blaming him. Sure enough, the wife went to the maid's bed and found the spoons and told the man she would take care of it. The woman was surprised because she had never known the maid to steal anything, so she concluded that the maid had not been sleeping in her own bed during the time of the wife's absence, but had taken her place with her husband. The wife formulated a plot of revenge. She left the spoons where she found them and asked the maid to remake the bed, because she intended to sleep there herself since her mother-in-law would be staying in her bed. The maid found the spoons when making the bed, but knew she could not reveal them now without telling the truth about where she had slept during the wife's absence, so she hid them in her trunk with the intent to move them elsewhere later. That night, as the wife laid in the maid's bed, her husband came into the room, thinking her the maid. The wife simply remained silent and allowed her husband to believe this, slipping away in the morning before he woke. She told her mother-in-law everything and sent a constable to charge the maid with stealing the spoons. The maid's trunk was busted open and the spoons were found inside, so the maid was found guilty. The husband, who had left the house for a few hours, returned, and upon hearing the fate of the maid got into a fight with his wife, and his own mother sided against him. The wife and mother left back to the mother's house, all but ending their marriage. While the maid waited in prison, it was discovered that she was with child. When her trial finally came, the wife took pity on her, knowing she had stolen nothing but the affections of her husband, so she did not appear in court. The maid was acquitted and soon after delivered a baby girl, who would later become Anne Bonny. However, it was discovered that the wife was also pregnant, and the husband, who did not know he had spent a night with her, accused her of cheating on him to justify his own adultery. The wife gave birth to twins, and when the husband's mother died, she left her will to these children. The wife, who was definitely being kinder than the man deserved, provided him with a yearly allowance of the money. At this time, William, who had grown fond of his daughter Anne, dressed her as a boy going by the name of Andy, and said she was the son of a relative who he was teaching his trade to. The wife, who knew he had no such relative, inquired further and found the boy was actually the daughter of the maid, and refused to give any more money to the bastard child. The husband was upset with this, and decided he would bring the maid to live with him. This made him the scandal of the neighborhood. Neighbors ridiculed him wherever he went, and he was unable to find any work, so William, Mary, and their child Anne packed up and immigrated to what is now Charleston, South Carolina. The family got off to a rough start in the Americas, but were eventually able to afford a townhouse and plantation of their own. Anne's father attempted to establish himself as an attorney again, but found it difficult, and eventually turned to the more profitable trade of merchant business, in which he accumulated a substantial fortune. When Anne was 12, her mother died. At this age, Anne is recorded as having fiery red hair and a temper to match it. She supposedly stabbed and murdered her English maid with a case knife, and when a young man attempted to assault her, she put him in the hospital for several weeks. Nonetheless, she was considered a good catch by the men in her village, and her father had hoped to marry her off to a good family. Much to his displeasure, she fell in love with and married a poor sailor and small-time pirate named James Bonny. James hoped to inherit his father-in-law's estate, but his plan went awry when Anne was disowned by her father for marrying the pirate. From there, Anne and James moved to the pirate hideout of Nassau on New Providence Island in the British Bahamas, where they took the king's pardon offered by Governor Woodes Rogers for pirates to return to an honest life of work. Anne made many pirate friends here, most notably the English pirate captain John Rackham, commonly known as Calico Jack, for the calico clothing that he wore. Very little is known about Rackham's upbringing, other than that he was born around 1682. It is recorded that in 1718 he was a quartermaster on a ship called the Ranger, captained by the infamous Charles Vane. Following one of Vane's controversial battle choices, Rackham called a vote in which Vane was removed from captaincy and he was made the next captain. Rackham made his career plundering small vessels near the shore in the West Indies. After successful capture of a Spanish warship in Cuba, he and his crew made their way back to Nassau to ask Governor Woodes for a royal pardon. Claiming that they had been forced into piracy by Charles Vane, the men were allowed to stay in port, where Rackham would meet Anne Bonny. James Bonny, Anne's husband, had a hard time supporting her and had become a pirate informer for Governor Rogers. Anne was disappointed in him for this and began an affair with Calico Jack Rackham. Rackham offered Anne's husband a sum of money in exchange for Anne, but James refused the offer, and Anne detested the idea of being sold like an animal. Nonetheless, Anne and Rackham escaped the island together to continue their careers of piracy aboard a new stolen ship. While at sea, Anne dressed in men's clothes, although it is not clear whether this was because of the convenience provided by trousers, or to hide her gender from other pirates. Soon, Anne became pregnant, and Rackham left her to stay with some friends of his in Cuba to deliver the baby. The fate of Anne's first child is unknown. It is possible that the baby was abandoned, left with the family in Cuba, or even died at birth. After a few months, Anne rejoined Rackham back on board their ship, now joined in the crew by the other famous female pirate, Mary Read, whose upbringing bears a startling resemblance to Anne's own. Mary Read, also an illegitimate child, was born in England at the end of the 17th century. Her mother was married to a sailor, with whom she had a son before he left for a voyage at sea, where he would eventually disappear. Following his disappearance, Mary's mother became pregnant as a result of an affair. Ashamed, she went to live with some friends in the country to give birth. Shortly after they arrived in the country, her son died. In order to hide the death of her son and the birth of her illegitimate daughter, Mary's mother disguised her as her dead brother so she could receive financial support from her late husband's mother. The disguise worked, and Mary lived into her teenage years still dressed as a boy. She found work as a footboy, then later on a ship, and eventually joined the British military. Mary proved herself well in battle, and soon fell in love with a Flemish soldier whom she revealed her gender to, and they got married. The marriage of two soldiers became a big commotion, and they received many gifts. Mary and her husband left the military to acquire an inn named the Three Horseshoes in the Netherlands. However, her husband died soon after, and she rejoined the military in Holland and resumed her male dress. But, with no wars to fight, she quickly grew bored, and resigned to board a vessel bound for the West Indies. En route to its destination, the ship was taken by pirates, whom Mary jumped at the chance to join. She then took the king's pardon in 1718 as well, and enjoyed a brief career as a pirateer, until her crew mutinied. In 1720, Mary Read joined Calico Jack Rackham's ship, where she would meet Anne Bonny, both women still dressed as men. Mary Read's true gender was not suspected by anyone on board, but Anne took a particular liking to her. Thinking her a very handsome young man, Anne confessed her own gender to Mary, leading Mary to reveal that she, too, was a woman. From then on, Anne and Mary grew very close, and there is even some speculation that they may have been in a relationship. Jack Rackham, Anne's lover, grew furiously jealous and threatened to cut Mary's throat, so Anne told him of her secret gender as well. Still, the three made a great team. In August of 1720, they stole an armed sloop named William from a port in Nassau and stole out to sea. They recruited a new crew and spent the next few months enjoying success in capturing many small vessels and bringing in a lot of treasure. Mary Read even fell in love with a young man who was captured and then joined Rackham's crew. She became good friends with him while disguised as a man, and once she revealed her gender, they began a relationship. However, by October of 1720, Governor Woodes Rogers issued a warrant declaring Rackham and his crew outlaws and sent pirate hunters after them, led by Jonathan Barnett. The pirate crew was celebrating a successful bounty and made anchor in Bry Harbor Bay in Jamaica for a night of drinking. Almost the entire crew was intoxicated or asleep when Jonathan Barnett's sloop attacked Rackham's ship. Mary Read and Anne Bonny were the only crew members on board who fought back. Angry with the men who so cowardly fled to the hold of the ship, Mary Read allegedly shot her pistol into the hull, killing one of the men and wounding others. Still, the men refused to come up and fight with them, and Barnett's crew overcame the two women, and Rackham surrendered. Rackham and his crew were brought to Spanish Town, Jamaica to be tried in November 1720. The entire crew was convicted of piracy and sentenced to be hanged. However, when it came to the judge's attention that two of the pirates were, in fact, women, Anne and Mary were given a separate trial. Still, they were convicted and sentenced to death, but when asked if they had anything to confess, both women pleaded their bellies, or asked for mercy because they were pregnant. In accordance with English common law, Anne and Mary were both given a temporary stay of execution until they gave birth. Calico Jack Rackham was executed in Port Royal on November 18, 1720, and his body was then given and on display as a warning to any remaining pirates. Anne's last words to her lover before he died were, reportedly, "I'm sorry to see you here, but had you fought like a man, you need not have been hanged like a dog." Tragically, Mary Read died of a violent fever from childbirth while in prison. She was buried at St. Catherine's Church in Jamaica on April 28, 1721. There is no record of the burial of her baby, suggesting she died before she gave birth. We know that Rackham and Mary's story ended in death, but Anne's story is a little more mysterious. Most commonly, it is agreed that Anne stayed in prison until she gave birth and was later released, but there is no historical record of her release or of her execution. Many possibilities have been speculated, such as that her father, William Cormac, paid her ransom, that she returned to her husband, James Bonny, or even that she may have resumed her life of piracy under an entirely new identity. Some historians claim that Anne returned to South Carolina, where she was remarried and started a family, dying in April of 1782. However, there is no way to know for sure what Anne Bonny's real fate was, only that she, along with Mary Read, became the two most well-known women pirates in history.